that folks are still coming in. That's great. They're going to have a good crowd today. So welcome to this special event, which is part of a Transgender Archives project that's funded by the Council on Library and Information Resources. It's from a grant called Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives, Amplifying Unheard Voices. I'm Aaron DeVore. I'm the founder of the Chair in Transgender Studies and the Transgender Archives and the Moving Trans History Forward conferences. I'm going to be working with Michael Radmacher today. We're going to give you an introduction to the project in a moment. So before we do that, territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, who are the Songhees and the Esquimalt people on whose territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Lekwungen and Saanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Right. So in 2024, the Transgender Archives, part of the University of Victoria Libraries, partnership with the Chair in Transgender Studies, received a grant from the Council on Library and Information Resources, which is more commonly known as CLIR, C-L-I-R. And the grant was to digitize, preserve, describe, and make accessible at-risk audiovisual items documenting the history of trans plus activism from the 1970s to the 2000s. And that 2-year grant runs to the beginning of 2027. So part of the job at the Transgender Archives is to ethically protect people's privacy while at the same time aspiring to as much openness and accessibility as possible. And this becomes increasingly challenging to navigate in light of today's socio-political climate. I don't have to tell you about that, and technological advances, which we're also feeling. So grappling with these ethical and practical tensions is at the core of the project, and the project itself is called Transformation, Digitizing the Rikki Swin Institute Trans Plus Activism and Outreach Media Collection. So the Rikki Swin Institute collection was the original collection that started the Transgender Archives, and there's lots of digital material in there. So these tensions are particularly acute when creating digital collections of historical materials depicting trans plus communities, when the historical materials, as well as today, but especially throughout much of our history, people's survival depended on their ability to keep their gender identities and their gender diversity hidden. So this is a conversation-based online workshop that offers trans plus community members and allies who have relevant professional expertise to help us get the balance right. That's the purpose of today, is we want your advice. So today's session will review the progress of the project so far, invite you to advise us on how to best balance offering appropriate accessibility to historical trans plus audiovisual materials, how to balance that against the risks associated with making those materials publicly available to a public who wants to and deserves to know their history. So Michael's going to make a presentation reviewing all of what we've done. And then afterwards, I'm going to lead a discussion about a number of questions that we have about how we're doing. What do you think of the decisions we've made so far? So I'm going to turn it over to Michael now to review the project.
So thanks, Aaron. And thanks to the Chair in Transgender Studies for hosting this event. So yes, Aaron covered most of that, the nuts and bolts there. One thing I'll just mention here is that symbol you'll see a few times, including all around me, is the symbol of the Human Outreach and Achievement Institute that we're going to talk about more during the presentation. So Aaron covered who he is, but just so you know who I am, Michael Radmacher, he, him. So I'm the Transgender Archives Metadata and Outreach Librarian here at University of Victoria Libraries. I've been working with the archives since 2014, and I've been working with the chair for the past 10 years. So the agenda is that I'm going to talk for around 25 minutes, and we'll talk about the grants, the collection, and the project. And then you get to see a summary video of the materials, which is super fun in my humble opinion. And then we'll do the workshop. And the last thing I'll just say there is this grant gave us the time and space to do original research in the Transgender Archives. So, and I got the honor to do that. And I saw so much amazing stuff in the archives that you will see in this presentation, colors, designs, photos, typeface variants that reflect what I saw in the archives. So you get to have just a little taste of what was in this collection in the Transgender Archives. So Aaron covered most of this. So thank you to UVic Libraries, the Trans Chair, and for CLIR for making this happen. And this is the pictures at the bottom are just examples of the physical media. So to be clear, this is magnetic media, VHS, Betacams, audio cassettes, stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. Magnetic media, the oldest material goes back to 1967. Okay, so the grant is called the name of the grant has the name Rikki Swin. Who's Rikki Swin? I'm just going to give you a quick overview. So Rikki Swin, in 2001, she's a very notable American trans woman. She founded the Institute of Gender Education, Research, Library, and Archives, the RSI, in Chicago, and it was dedicated to transgender research and education. It included, the archives, included materials from Ariadne or Ari Kane. You'll learn more about that person in a moment. And then the RSI closed in 2004, and like Aaron said, Rikki's donation became the founding donation of the Transgender Archives at UVic Libraries. All right, so Ariadne Kane. So really the materials mostly reflect the life and the work of Ariadne Kane. So Ari, I may say Ari, I may say Ariadne, I may say he, I may say she. She identified in the materials as a bigenderist or an androgyne, and she just lived comfortably in both gender roles. So you see what she would call her brother role here and also her femme role here. So in 1975, Ariadne founded the Human Outreach and Achievement Institute, later named the Outreach Institute for Gender Studies. I just want to spend time on the first name there. Take a look at it. What the hell is that? Like, you don't even know what that means at the time in 1975. It's like, it seems like just a human outreach and achievement. It just had no connection to gender or sexuality. And just let's focus on, this is the time frame that we're in, is that it was too dangerous to have something that was really forward in gender or sexuality. It did change in time, but it's a very like benign kind of name. In 1975, Kane also co-founded Fantasia Fair, and some of the documents in the archives actually said that the original name was Fantasia TV Fair. And remember TV, we'll come back to that in a minute. And it's also known as Fanfare. It actually still happens to this day in Provincetown, Massachusetts. It's called now Trans Week. And it's still running. It's one of the world's longest running trans conference. It goes back a long time. And UVic Libraries now stewards Kane's materials. And this is the materials that we digitized, a part of this collection. So what are the materials? What is reflected? So generally speaking, the materials reflect Kane's work in gender and sexuality education at a time in America when deviations from the norm routinely resulted in publicly accepted and legal ridicule and condemnation, personal isolation, professional discrimination, and physical violence. Now, I've talked to folks throughout the past year and a half with this project, and sometimes the reaction I get is, oh, sounds like today. And I hear you, it's not good out there. However, when I talk to trans elders, they make it perfectly clear it was much worse at this time. So I just want to respect what I've been told by trans elders as well. And this is a beautiful sketching from from Provincetown that was in the Fantasia Fair booklet. And there's a place for us. It was called Fantasia Fair because this was literally a fantasy to be able to live for a week or two, depending on what year you went, on the streets, walking in your authentic self. Like, that was not available to the vast majority of the registrants. So it's kind of a beautiful image reflecting that. All right, look at that lady with a hat. What did we digitize? So 316 videotapes, 203 audio tapes, almost 700 digital AV files altogether, and that's almost 500 hours of material. And I got to watch every single second of it, and it was amazing. Now, I want to be clear, that is not a normal workflow when it comes to libraries, when it comes to digitizing materials, is that normally the capacity limits of libraries and archives do not allow people to to like staff to review the materials every second of it. I got to watch every second of it because it was a grant funded specific project. All right. So how do the materials break down? So you can see that the vast majority, or no, that's a lie, 43% is Fantasia Fair. And then the other 43% is other live events and conferences. And we'll talk about that more. So yeah, Fantasia Fair, we've talked about it a bit. Workshops, interviews, award banquets, fashion shows, follies. The live events and conferences, those are like mostly professional conferences. So we're talking Quad S. So that's the Society for the Scientific Study of Sex, or ASECT, the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, or HBIGDA, Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association. I did it. So these are the kind of events and conferences that are 43% of the materials. TV shows, so it's only 8%, but TV and radio shows, so we're talking about the big names. Phil Donahue, David Susskind, he was a big name in the day, Sally Jesse Raphael, stuff like that, and also local radio shows from Provincetown. You may be wondering, what's the oldest material? So it's actually 1967. It's a CBC audio interview with John Money. And if folks who are familiar with the David Reimer, the John Joan case, our understanding is that this is the first time that David Reimer's mother heard of John Money and thought, hey, he could maybe help my son. Education and creative productions, that's only 6% of the materials. So this is usually like purchasable educational stuff, like Gender 101 from the International Federation of Gender Education, and also HBO material. So this is kind of like you have to pay for it. You have to be in the know almost. It's yeah. And then also I Don't Know Dick. And I highlighted that because the materials, the collection as a whole, really focus on the trans feminine experiences, but there is some trans masculine experiences in there as well. Not as much though. So that's just an overview of the collection. We're now going to be shifting into the project here. So this is really the crux of it all. And I would be sharing this quote from somebody called Dr. Aaron DeVore. Even if he wasn't in this call, I've mentioned this quote numerous times, is that this is really the issue we're dealing with. And I'll just read the quote that he wrote in the book, The Foundations for the Future, the Transgender Archives. It's, all people need to know their history, even more so for people who have been so abject that, through much of our history, our very survival has depended on our ability to keep our gender variance hidden. So, how do institutions like UVic Libraries strive to an open and accessible future with our trans materials, while at the same time appreciating this reality, right? So that's where we're at. Well, we start with community resources and tools. So these are three big ones that I want to focus on, is that this project and our best practices stand on the shoulders of community created and driven best practices. So, you know, full disclosure, I am a member of the Homosaurus Collective, and I think I saw some folks in here from the collective. So what the Homosaurus does, it's an international LGBTQ plus linked data vocabulary. I could talk forever about this, I won't. But what this allows us to do is to describe the materials with granularity that are culturally specific to the materials that we can't get from other vocabularies. And remember I talked about how one of the Fantasia Fair, some of the documents say that the first name was Fantasia TV Fair. As I'm sure you folks most know, TV stood for transvestite. Now that's a term that largely we don't use anymore and is considered offensive. Not everyone agrees with that, but mostly, yes. But transvestite is a very important historically significant term that we can't just delete. We have to be able to keep those connective tissues together. So the Homosaurus is a great tool for us to include these terminologies in the record, in the item record, in the online record, while at the same time being able to give historical context via the scope notes. I'll move on. Digital Transgender Archives, they are amazing. KJ Rawson, you may be here. I'll give you a shout out. they produced a harm reduction guide, and it does exactly what it says, is that it gives best practices on how to balance the benefits of posting something versus the potential harm. And I'll also shout out the metadata best practices for trans and diverse, gender diverse folks. And it's focused more on cataloging and like managing names, and it gives like email templates, I do believe, for if you need to contact somebody about what their wishes are on how to be represented in a catalog. So we stand on the shoulders of community-driven best practices. All right, so we need to define what we consider ethical is. We consider ethical to be two parts. One part is do no harm, most importantly. So we're centering people, not objects. We talk to trans plus people to understand the context, especially those who were there, use culturally appropriate descriptions, and celebrate trans people and protect their privacy. Mistakes will be made, so we have to be responsive. The other one is accessibility. So trans people, especially youth, are hungry for their history and deserve to know their community pioneers by name when possible. And trans allyship can increase when historical context is known and is accessible. I've seen this a million times with Aaron and Jay when we table at events, is that sometimes we get folks walking up that are not super supportive. I find the best way to cut through to their heart is through the archival materials, because they're undeniable. They're just facts. They're in front of you. And there's a generational responsibility to balance the realistic risks of accessibility with the powerful impact of making trans plus histories available. And I just want to say that we can't be absolute with either of these. So just imagine if we're absolutist, 100% do no harm, we can't accept 1% of risk. You know what that means? That means throwing everything in a lockbox and not showing anyone, right? Arguably, that's not ethical. And conversely, if we were absolutist with accessibility, 100%, then we're slapping 100% online without due care and diligence. That's not ethical too. So we're trying to find the balance. There's risks. Hello, there's risks. So, by the way, just enjoy the biker there. All right. So one of the risks is privacy, obviously. Privacy of individuals. We do not want to be accidentally outing people who don't want to be outed. And this includes names, faces, voices. Sensitive content. So treating sensitive content with trans-informed care. Surgical procedures, talk of violence, self-harm, and also understanding the changing identity vocabularies that the materials reflect. Some people take pride in these terms. Some people are offended by these terms. Bad faith actors is a risk. So bad faith actors using materials to manipulate and misrepresent trans people, communities, and cultures. When something hits online, it's difficult to control bad faith actors. So we'll talk more about that. And AI search engine, AI and search engines. So AI harvesters and search engines crawl the materials, including its descriptions, its metadata, and its transcriptions. We do want a level of crawling because that's how people find the resources, but we also want to stop certain levels of crawling and harvesting. So we're just going to stop here for a moment because this is the most important slide out of all the slides. Why? Because it's the people. I was able to identify 610 people in the materials. Now, take a look. You may be able to recognize some of these people. If you do, throw it in the chat. Actually, I'll just, yes, please chat. I was able to identify 610. And out of those folks, 531 I could name. And how could I name them? It's through working with the community for a long time. I just knew some of them. But more importantly, archival research. So through conference programs, through event documentation, through letters, et cetera, I was able to attach 530 names. Now, out of the rubrics that we used, 370 of them we're considering public, and 240 are private or unknown. Well, how did we decide that? The first thought is, are they a publicly known trans plus person or an ally? So, you know, I'm looking at some of these people, and good luck trying to put them back into the closet. They have chosen with agency to step out publicly by name, saying, I am trans, hear me roar. So sometimes they're just public, and it is unethical to just recloset them out of fear of risk, right? Do they knowingly, or sorry, did they knowingly participate in a production clearly intended for public broadcast? So when you show up on the Oprah show and you have a first name and a last name posted, you're pretty public, and you're talking about trans issues specifically. That's pretty public. Do they have a self-generated trans plus or ally presence online? So this one's a little more tricky, because if you search somebody's name online, sometimes you kind of get into an ecosystem of finding aids where the finding aids are scraped, and all of a sudden you do a quick look, and oh, the person's public. They have names online. Those finding aids, you, we need more than just finding aids having a person's name present. We need self-generated uh, uh, content where the person themselves with agency steps forward, saying, again, I am trans and I want to be public about this. Nancy Nangerino, I want to point out, is a great example of that. She has, a podcast and a blog where she talks about these issues a lot, and many other people on this picture. All right. So also, when seeing that Fantasia Fair is a large chunk of this collection, what did registrants know or agree to when they registered, right? So because we were able to do primary research, there was actually photo and video policies and release forms that Fantasia Fair registrants agreed to. So these are taken right from the program, and I highlighted the yellow, so I'll just read the yellow. But is that photo of you? We don't know. It's unlikely that someone seeing that picture will be able to say, by golly, that's good old George, unless George shows it to them. So, and the photos and videos, people knew that they were maybe shared with professional and academic groups, cross-dressing clubs, and those participating in the fair who want a memory of it. All right, so available actions. So on the left-hand side, we're talking about what is posted online versus on the right. Once it's posted, what is the access options to that material? So we have some options here, right? One of them is posting a statement to CLIR. That demonstrates our intent and signals potentially upsetting content to people. Content warnings. So that enables people to self-select while maintaining access for others. Right statement demonstrates expectations of use and applies governing principles. Only public names. So post only names of known public people. That's a big one. Also, takedown notice enables people to request removal of material. And out of all of these, only public names is one that I spent the vast majority of my time working on. It took over a year to splice out names that we think is ethically able to be attached to the metadata versus not to put those names attached. Because the vast majority of people found online is through name searches, not necessarily just by glimpsing a face of somebody in the background, right? All right, so that's what's being posted online. Access options. Search engines. So we only want to post information we want to be used for discovery. AI bot harvesting. Block known aggressive AI scraping bots. Now, for anyone who's in this field, they know that this is not just troublesome for us. It's troublesome for everyone. And there is no magic arrow with this. If something gets posted online, no matter how well you're good at blocking or doing all the things that you can do, it's still vulnerable. So I don't want to give a false impression that it's like safe from AI. It's like it's not. But we do what we can, which is best practices across other institutions as well. No download. So users can stream, but no download. Now, people can screen record, so there's ways around this. But again, it's just erecting barriers, annoying barriers that may lower risk more and more and more. Set to private. So this is mediated access by requiring users to request login. That is an option. So instead of just public access, you need permission, frankly, from us. And then the last case, the last note is do not post online. So while in-person access is maintained, materials is not posted online. And that's an option. All right, original audience. That's really important because understanding the original audience of the materials largely informs how we treat it today, right? So what do I mean by that? These are the four. These are four categories that we've talked about before, right? These are the four main buckets of materials. The high at the top, it's more public. At the bottom, it's more private. So TV shows, radio shows, that was for wide public broadcast. For the original audience was wide public broadcast. So we can feel pretty confident that is pretty darn public. Now, a little less public, but not private, is educational and creative materials. So that's just more narrow paid distribution. You kind of have to be a little bit more in the know. It's not, showing up on channel 3. Events and conferences. So this is paid membership stuff. This is like professional materials. These are people who like are in the know when to show up at a certain day and time. It is public, but it's not private. And your name is usually posted in a professional program. So the most private materials we have is Fantasia Fair. So that is only Trans Plus and allies. Now, to be clear, a lot of Fantasia Fair programming was available and open to the public of Provincetown. People could walk in and enjoy the Fantasia Fair Follies or fashion show. So I don't think that Fantasia Fair was like super duper duper private. It was open to an extent to the public as well. All right, so we talked about all our available actions. We talked about original audience. Now, how do we apply those actions to the materials? Well, for all materials, we are including a statement to care. We're including content warnings. We're including an educational use right statement. We're only including public names. And we're including takedown notices. Now, you'll recognize these 4 buckets again, cascading down to most private. Allow downloads? Well, we're dealing with copyright with some of this stuff, which doesn't mean we can't post it, but we probably won't allow downloads. Transcriptions? Well, yes, but if we spent so much time and care dealing with people's names, and then if we transcribe it, people say the names, and then if we post the transcriptions online, we've totally undercut our efforts here. So we would have to go through and redact names, which is a labor-intensive process. Set to private or public? We're thinking a lot of these we can do public based on the original audience, with exceptions, and some of these exceptions we're going to talk about in the workshop. And post online. We're thinking, yes, we can post most of these materials online, except materials that we're going to talk about. We're talking about bottom and top surgery discussions and videos and pictures, in addition to potentially private conversations at Fantasia Fair. All right, I'm going to end here. So this project doesn't just have trans participation, it has trans leadership. The chair in Transgender Studies is a co-PI on this and has been there since day one, and I think that's super important. We have had consultations and workshops at Moving Trans History Forward. We're speaking with trans elders, people who are there, and that includes honoraria. That's in progress. We're doing community talks. I've done some. Today is some. And hopefully we have applied to actually present at Trans Week, Fantasia Fair. And that would be like a dream to go. That would be really fun. And then because we've learned so much, we want to give back. So there's a bunch of library and archives conferences too that I'm presenting at and working with to share the knowledge.